Marcus wiped his greasy hands on his work coveralls as he heard the expensive car pull into the garage. The sound was different from the usual broken-down vehicles that came to Johnson's auto repair. This one purred like a well-fed cat, smooth and confident. He looked up from under the hood of an old pickup truck to see a sleek black Mercedes pulling into the bay. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman who clearly didn't belong in this part of town. She wore a crisp white business suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 3 months. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor as she walked toward him, her phone pressed to her ear. "I don't care what the board thinks, Thompson. We need that contract signed by Friday or we lose the entire deal," she was saying into her phone. Her voice carried authority, the kind that made people jump when she spoke. Marcus had been working at Johnson's for 5 years now, ever since he graduated from technical school. He was good with engines, really good. Cars seemed to talk to him in a language only he understood. But he'd never seen anyone like this woman walk through their doors. She ended her call and looked around the garage with barely hidden distaste. Oil stains covered the floor. Tools were scattered on workbenches, and the whole place smelled like motor oil and old coffee. Marcus suddenly felt embarrassed about his workplace, seeing it through her eyes. "Excuse me?" she called out, her voice cutting through the noise of pneumatic tools and radio music. "I need to speak to the manager." Old Joe Johnson was in the back office, probably taking his afternoon nap. Marcus set down his wrench and walked over to her, trying not to leave grease prints on anything. "Joe's not available right now. I'm Marcus. Maybe I can help you?" She looked him up and down, taking in his worn coveralls and oil-stained hands. Her expression suggested she wasn't impressed. "I'm Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries. My car broke down about 2 miles from here and I need it fixed immediately. I have a crucial board meeting in 2 hours." Marcus had heard of Sterling Industries. They owned half the factories in the city and employed thousands of people. This woman was practically royalty in their small industrial town, and here she was standing in their humble garage. "What kind of problem are you having?" Marcus asked, genuinely interested in helping despite her obvious skepticism about the place. "The engine just died. It was running fine, then started making terrible noises, and then nothing. My regular mechanic is across town, but I can't wait for a tow truck." She glanced at her expensive watch. "Like I said, I have a meeting that cannot be postponed." Marcus nodded. "Let me take a look. We can probably get you back on the road quickly." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You? Aren't you a bit young to be working on luxury vehicles?" The comment stung, but Marcus was used to people doubting him because of his age and appearance. At 26, he looked even younger, and his casual demeanor often made people think he wasn't serious about his work. "I've been fixing cars since I was 12, he said simply. "My grandfather taught me. Age doesn't matter much when it comes to understanding engines." Victoria looked skeptical but walked back toward her car. Marcus followed, already running through possible problems in his mind. Mercedes were well built, but they could be tricky when things went wrong. "It started making a grinding noise about 10 minutes before it died," she explained as they reached the vehicle. "Almost like metal on metal." Marcus popped the hood and immediately heard a faint ticking sound that shouldn't have been there. He grabbed a flashlight and peered into the engine compartment. After a few minutes of careful examination, he spotted the problem. "Found it," he said, straightening up. "Your timing belt snapped. When that happens, your pistons and valves can collide, causing serious damage. I need to check if your engine has interference or non-interference design." Victoria stared at him. "In English, please?" "Your engine might be completely ruined, or it might just need a new belt. Won't know until I take a closer look." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. This could be a 15-minute job or a $1,500 job. $1,500? Victoria's voice rose. "For a belt? If the pistons damage the valves, yeah. Could even be more than that." Marcus shrugged. "Like I said, I need to dig deeper to know for sure." Victoria pulled out her phone and started dialing. "I'll just call for another car service." "Good luck." "With that," Marcus said, not unkindly, "it's Friday afternoon and you're in the industrial district. Most services won't come out here, and if they do, you're looking at least an hour wait time." She put her phone down, frustration clear on her face. Around them, the sounds of the garage continued. Impact wrenches spinning, classic rock playing from a paint-spattered radio, and the occasional shout between mechanics. How long would it take you to determine the extent of the damage? She asked. Give me 30 minutes to tear into it properly. If it's just the belt, another 30 minutes to fix it. If it's worse? Marcus trailed off. Victoria checked her watch again and made a decision. Fine, but I'm not paying $1,500 for anything. If this engine can't be fixed quickly and cheaply, I'll find another way to my meeting. Marcus grinned. Tell you what, Ms. Sterling. If I can't fix this engine and get you to your meeting on time, the diagnosis is free. But if I do fix it, you owe me dinner. The words were out of his mouth before he realized what he'd said. The other mechanics in the garage had gone quiet, sensing something interesting was happening. Victoria Sterling stared at him for a long moment, then threw back her head and laughed. It was a genuine, surprised laugh that transformed her entire face. If you fix this engine, I'll marry you, she said, still laughing. That's how impossible I think this is going to be. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he managed to keep his voice steady. Deal, but I'm holding you to that. As Victoria walked toward the small waiting area, pulling out her laptop to work, Marcus rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He had no idea that this broken-down Mercedes would change both their lives forever. Marcus worked with focused intensity, his hands moving with practiced precision through the Mercedes engine compartment. The other mechanics in the garage kept glancing over, curious about the expensive car and its even more expensive owner. Word had spread quickly about the bet, and now everyone wanted to see if the young mechanic could pull off what seemed impossible. Victoria sat in the small waiting area, typing furiously on her laptop. Every few minutes, she would look up and check her watch, then glance toward Marcus working on her car. The board meeting was getting closer, and her stress levels were rising with each passing minute. Found the problem, Marcus called out after 20 minutes of careful examination. He emerged from under the hood, his face streaked with grease but wearing a confident smile. Good news and bad news. Victoria saved her document and walked over to him. Bad news first. Your timing belt didn't just snap. It shredded completely. Took out your water pump too, and there's some damage to the valve cover gasket. Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls. In a normal shop, this would be a 2-day job minimum. And the good news? Victoria's voice was flat, already preparing for disappointment. The good news is your engine has a non-interference design. That means when the belt broke, your pistons and valves didn't crash into each other. No internal damage. Marcus's grin widened. Which means I can fix this. Victoria looked skeptical. In 30 minutes, you said you needed parts? That's where it gets interesting. Marcus walked over to a parts shelf and pulled down several components. Last month, we worked on another Mercedes with the exact same engine. Customer decided not to fix it because the repair cost more than the car was worth. Joe kept all the parts we'd ordered. He held up a timing belt, water pump, and gasket set. Everything I need, sitting right here on the shelf. Brand, new, never used. Victoria stared at the parts, then at Marcus. What are the odds of that? In this business? Pretty good, actually. Popular cars break down in popular ways. Marcus was already heading back to the engine. Give me 45 minutes and you'll be back on the road. As Marcus worked, Victoria found herself watching him more closely. His movements were economical and sure, no wasted motion. He talked to the engine as he worked, a constant murmur of commentary that made her smile despite her stress. Come on, beautiful, work with me here, he was saying to a particularly stubborn bolt. I know you don't want to come loose, but we're trying to help your lady get to her important meeting. Other customers began arriving at the garage, but the other mechanics handled them while Marcus focused entirely on the Mercedes. Joe Johnson finally emerged from his office, took one look at the expensive car and its owner, and wisely decided not to interfere. You've got steady hands, Victoria observed, moving closer to watch Marcus work on the timing mechanism. My grandfather always said surgery and engine repair aren't that different. Both require precision, patience, and respect for what you're working on. Marcus carefully aligned the timing marks. He was a medic in Vietnam, taught me to fix engines when I came to live with him. You lived with your grandfather? Marcus nodded, not looking up from his work. My parents died in a car accident when I was 10. Grandpa Joe raised me. Different Joe than the one who owns this place, by the way. Taught me that honest work with your hands is nothing to be ashamed of. Victoria fell silent, processing this information. She'd made assumptions about Marcus based on his appearance and workplace, but clearly there was more to his story. Almost done, Marcus announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. Just need to fill the cooling system and test everything. He added coolant to the radiator, then climbed into the driver's seat. Victoria held her breath as he turned the key. The engine cranked once, twice, then roared to life with a smooth, powerful sound. Marcus let it idle for a few minutes, checking for leaks and listening to the engine's rhythm. Everything sounded perfect. That's impossible, Victoria breathed, staring at her dashboard as all the warning lights went out. You actually fixed it? Told you I would. Marcus climbed out of the car, grinning. Want to take it for a test drive? They drove around the block, the Mercedes purring like it had never been broken. Victoria couldn't hide her amazement as she felt the smooth power delivery and heard the quiet, confident sound of the engine. How much do I owe you? She asked as they pulled back into the garage. Marcus thought for a moment. Parts cost about $300. Labor, how about we call it $500 total? Victoria pulled out her checkbook. $500 was nothing to her, less than she spent on lunch some days. But as she wrote out the check, she realized something had shifted in how she saw this young mechanic. There's just one problem, Marcus said as she handed him the check. What's that? His grin turned slightly embarrassed. You technically owe me a wedding, Victoria laughed, remembering her impulsive comment. I did say that, didn't I? You did. In front of witnesses. Marcus gestured toward the other mechanics, who were all pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Well, I'm a woman of my word, Victoria said, surprising herself. But I think dinner might be a more appropriate starting point. The other mechanics burst into applause and wolf whistles. Marcus turned red but kept smiling. Tomorrow night? He asked. I know a great place. Victoria was about to suggest one of the upscale restaurants downtown when something stopped her. You picked the place. You earned it. As she drove away toward her board meeting, which she would now arrive at with 5 minutes to spare, Victoria found herself thinking about Marcus's gentle competence and easy confidence. She'd never met anyone quite like him. Meanwhile, Marcus watched her expensive car disappear into traffic, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He'd asked out plenty of women before, but never a CEO, and never one who lived in a completely different world from his own. But something about Victoria Sterling intrigued him beyond her obvious beauty and success. When she'd laughed at his joke about dinner, her whole face had transformed and he'd glimpsed something warm and real beneath the polished professional exterior. Boy, you better clean up nice, called out Jimmy, one of the older mechanics. That woman probably eats at places where they don't even have prices on the menu. Marcus just smiled and went back to work on the pickup truck. He had a date to prepare for, and somehow he suspected his life was about to get a lot more complicated. Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He'd bought the navy blue suit that afternoon, his first new suit in 3 years. The salesman had assured him it looked good, but Marcus felt like he was wearing a costume. His small apartment above the garage was clean but simple. A fold-out couch, a tiny kitchen, and walls covered with framed pictures of classic cars and his grandfather. Everything he owned could probably fit in the back of a pickup truck, which seemed ridiculous considering he was about to have dinner with one of the richest women in the city. Victoria had given him her business card with her personal number, written on the back. When he'd called to confirm their date, she'd sounded genuinely pleased to hear from him, which had boosted his confidence. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all some kind of elaborate joke. He'd chosen Romano's, a family-owned Italian restaurant on the other side of town. The food was incredible, the atmosphere warm and welcoming, and the prices reasonable. It wasn't fancy by Victoria's standards, but it was honest. And Marcus figured if she was going to get to know him, she might as well start with who he really was. Victoria arrived exactly on time, driving a different car this time. A red sports car that probably cost more than Marcus would make in 5 years. She'd traded her business suit for a simple black dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable. "You clean up nice," she said with a smile as they met at the restaurant entrance. "So do you," Marcus replied, then immediately felt stupid for the obvious comment. Romano's was busy for a Saturday night, filled with families celebrating birthdays and couples on dates. The hostess, Maria Romano, greeted Marcus with a warm hug. "Marcus, it's been too long. Your usual table?" "Thanks, Maria. This is Victoria." Maria looked Victoria up and down with the sharp eyes of someone who'd been sizing up customers for 30 years, then smiled approvingly. "Welcome to Romano's, dear. Any friend of Marcus's family here." As they were seated at a corner table, with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, Marcus noticed Victoria looking around with interest rather than judgment. "This place has character," she said, watching a waiter carry a tray of steaming pasta dishes past their table. "Best Italian food in the city," Marcus said. "My grandfather brought me here for my 16th birthday. Said a man needed to know at least one place where he could take a lady for a proper meal." Victoria smiled at that. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. Died 2 years ago, but I still hear his voice when I'm working on engines. He used to say that you could tell everything about a person by watching how they treated a broken-down car." "What did he mean by that?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Some people see a problem and get angry, blame the car for letting them down. Others see a challenge, something to figure out and fix. And some people just see an opportunity to help someone who's stuck." Victoria considered this while looking at the menu. "Which category do I fall into?" "Yesterday." "You were definitely in the angry category at first," Marcus said with a grin. "But then you were willing to trust a stranger to help you out of a jam. That says something good about your character." Their conversation flowed easier than Marcus had expected. Victoria asked about his work, and he found himself telling stories about the unusual problems he'd solved and the grateful customers he'd helped. She laughed at his description of Mrs. Henderson, who brought her ancient Buick in every month for an oil change and cookies for the mechanics. "What about you?" Marcus asked as they shared a plate of antipasto. "How does someone become CEO of a major company before they're 30? Victoria's expression grew more serious. "Hard work, luck, and probably too much ambition for my own good. My father started Sterling Industries, but he wanted sons to carry on the business. When I was born, instead he figured he'd have to settle for training me to run things. Sounds like pressure." It was. "I graduated college at 20, had my MBA at 22, and started at the bottom of the company to learn every department. Worked 16-hour days for years to prove I belonged there." Victoria paused to sip her wine. "When Dad had his heart attack 3 years ago, the board wanted to bring in outside management. I had to fight for the right to run the company I'd been preparing to lead my entire life." Marcus could hear the exhaustion beneath her professional success. "Do you ever get to just be yourself? Not the CEO, just Victoria?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. "I'm not sure I remember who that is anymore. The company is everything. My identity, my purpose, my social life. Until yesterday, I couldn't tell you the last time I did something just for fun." Their main courses arrived, and Marcus watched Victoria take her first bite of Romano's famous lasagna. Her eyes widened, with genuine pleasure. "This is incredible," she said. "I haven't had food this good since I can't even remember when." "You don't cook?" Victoria laughed. "I have a housekeeper who leaves meals in the refrigerator. Usually I eat at my desk while working." She took another bite. "This is what I've been missing." As the evening progressed, Marcus saw glimpses of the woman Victoria might be when she wasn't carrying the weight of a major corporation on her shoulders. She was curious about everything, asking detailed questions about engine repair and listening with genuine interest to his answers. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said as they shared tiramisu for dessert. "Why did you ask me out? I mean, really, we're from completely different worlds." Marcus considered the question seriously. "At first I was just attracted to you. Beautiful woman, obviously intelligent. But then I watched how you handled the stress of potentially missing your meeting. You didn't take it out on me or the situation. You just focused on finding a solution." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "And when you laughed about the marriage thing, it wasn't mean or condescending. It was just genuine. I don't meet many people who are genuinely themselves, you know?" Victoria felt something warm in her chest at his words. "I was attracted to your confidence. Not arrogance, just quiet certainty in your abilities, and you treated me like a person, not a title or a bank account." "Well, I didn't know about the bank account at the time," Marcus said with a grin. As they prepared to leave, Victoria insisted on paying the check, which led to a good-natured argument that ended with them agreeing to split it. "I had a wonderful time," Victoria said as they stood by their cars in the parking lot. "I can't remember the last time I laughed that much." "Me too. Would you like to do this again sometime?" Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus could see her weighing something in her mind. Finally, she smiled. "Yes, but next time, let me pick the place. I want to show you my world, the same way you showed me yours tonight." As they drove away in opposite directions, both Victoria and Marcus were thinking about how surprising the evening had been. Neither of them realized that news of their dinner together had already reached certain corners of the city, where people were very interested in the personal life of Victoria Sterling, and might not approve of her choice in companions. Marcus had never been to a place like the Metropolitan Club. The building itself looked like a palace, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers. Men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewelry moved through the dining room like they owned the world, which they probably did. Victoria had warned him it would be formal, so he'd rented a tuxedo for the occasion. Even so, he felt like everyone could tell he didn't belong here. The maitre d' looked at him with barely concealed suspicion, until Victoria appeared and guided Marcus to their table with easy familiarity. "You come here often?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice light as he looked around at the intimidating grandeur. "Board dinners, charity events, business meetings," Victoria said. "It's not really my favorite place, but I wanted you to see this part of my life too." Their table overlooked the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was spectacular, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Several times he caught other diners staring in their direction, whispering among themselves. "Am I imagining things, or are people staring at us?" he asked quietly. Victoria glanced around the room and sighed. "They're staring. Word travels fast in circles like these. Everyone knows who I am, and they're all wondering who you are." "Does that bother you?" "It should," Victoria said, meeting his eyes. "My board members eat here. Major investors, competing CEOs. By tomorrow morning, half the business community will know I was here with a man they don't recognize." Marcus felt a chill. "Maybe this was a mistake. I don't want to cause problems for you." "Don't you dare," Victoria said firmly. "I'm a grown woman who can have dinner with whomever I choose. If that bothers people, that's their problem, not mine." As if summoned by their conversation, a tall man in an expensive suit approached their table. He was probably 60, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "Victoria, darling," he said, not waiting for an invitation to interrupt. "How lovely to see you. I don't believe I've met your friend." Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Richard Blackwood, this is Marcus Johnson." "Marcus, Richard is on my board of directors." Richard extended his hand to Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Johnson, as in Johnson Industries?" "As in Johnson's Auto Repair," Marcus said, evenly shaking the man's hand. The temperature at the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard's smile faltered for just a moment before returning, even more forced than before. "How interesting," Richard said. "Victoria, I didn't realize you'd developed an interest in automotive work." "I've developed an interest in people who are good at what they do," Victoria replied coolly. Richard lingered for another uncomfortable moment, clearly wanting to say more, before excusing himself with false politeness. Marcus watched him return to his own table, where he immediately began speaking in low, urgent tones to his dinner companions. "Friend of yours?" Marcus asked. Richard would like to be more than a friend, and he's never been subtle about it, Victoria said. He's also been questioning my leadership decisions lately, looking for any excuse to undermine my authority with the board. Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach. And dating a mechanic would give him that excuse. Marcus, look at me. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. I don't care what Richard Blackwood thinks. I don't care what any of them think. I care about you and I care about us. The word us hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged that this was becoming something more than casual dating. Their dinner continued, but the mood had shifted. Marcus could feel the weight of scrutiny from around the room, and he knew Victoria could feel it too. She was putting on a brave face, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Tell me about your work, Marcus said, hoping to distract her. What's a typical day like for you? Victoria seemed grateful for the change of subject. She talked about contract negotiations, quarterly reports, and the challenges of managing thousands of employees. Marcus found himself genuinely interested in the complexity of running a major corporation, even as he realized how different their worlds really were. What about hobbies, he asked. What do you do for fun? Victoria paused, fork halfway to her mouth. Fun? Yeah, things you enjoy that aren't work-related. I work out sometimes. I read business journals. I attend cultural events for networking purposes. Victoria looked embarrassed. I'm realizing I don't actually have hobbies. Everyone needs hobbies, Marcus said. What did you enjoy as a kid before work took over your life? I used to paint, Victoria said slowly, as if remembering something from a previous lifetime. Watercolors, mostly landscapes. My art teacher said I had talent, but my father thought it was a waste of time. Do you still have any of your paintings? A few tucked away in storage somewhere. Victoria smiled sadly. I haven't picked up a brush in probably 10 years. Marcus made a mental note to remember that detail. If they kept seeing each other, he wanted to encourage the parts of Victoria that had nothing to do with corporate success. As they finished their meal, Marcus noticed Richard Blackwood approaching their table again, this time with another man in tow. Victoria, I'd like you to meet James Morrison from Morrison Holdings, Richard said without preamble. James is very interested in discussing the Henderson contract with you. It was a transparent attempt to interrupt their date with business, and Marcus could see Victoria's anger flashing in her eyes. Richard, this is neither the time nor the place for business discussions, she said firmly. Of course, Richard said, his smile becoming even more strained. Perhaps your friend here wouldn't mind if we just had a quick word? I'm sure he understands how important these matters are. The condescension in his tone made Marcus's hands clench under the table. He was being dismissed, treated like an inconvenience. That could be brushed aside while the important people talked business. Actually, Marcus said, standing up, I think Victoria and I were just leaving. She can discuss business with you during business hours. Richard's face flushed red at being challenged by someone he clearly considered beneath his notice. Young. Man, I don't think you understand who you're talking to. I understand perfectly, Marcus said calmly. I'm talking to someone who thinks his money gives him the right to be rude to people. Where I come from, we call that being a bully. The surrounding tables had gone quiet, sensing drama. Victoria stood as well, placing her hand on Marcus's arm. Marcus is right, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet dining room. Richard, if you have business to discuss, call my office Monday morning and make an appointment like everyone else. She took Marcus's arm and they walked out of the restaurant together, leaving Richard Blackwood standing red-faced by their abandoned table. In the parking lot, Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, she finally said. You shouldn't have had to deal with that. I'm not sorry, Marcus said. That guy was a complete jackass and you handled him perfectly. Victoria looked at him with something like wonder. You weren't intimidated by him at all. Should I have been? He's just a man in an expensive suit. Same as any bully I dealt with in school, just with better clothes. Victoria stepped closer to him in the dim parking lot lighting. Most people are intimidated by men like Richard. They have so much power, so much influence. The only power he has is what people give him, Marcus said. And I don't give bullies any power over me. Victoria kissed him then, right there in the parking lot of the Metropolitan Club. It was their first kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Victoria was smiling. I think I'm falling for you, Marcus Johnson. Good, Marcus said, grinning back at her, because I'm definitely falling for you too. Neither of them noticed the photographer with the long-range lens taking pictures from across the street, or realized that by morning, photos of their kiss would be in the hands of people who had very specific plans for Victoria Sterling's future. That didn't include a relationship with a working-class mechanic. Victoria stared at the newspaper spread across her desk, her hands trembling slightly with rage. The headline read, Sterling heiress slumming with mechanic, and below it was a crystal-clear photo of her kissing Marcus in the Metropolitan Club parking lot. The article was vicious, painting her as a foolish woman having a midlife crisis and Marcus as a gold digger taking advantage of a lonely CEO. Her assistant, Jennifer, hovered nervously in the doorway. Ms. Sterling, the board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Mr. Blackwood specifically requested it. Victoria crumpled the newspaper in her fists. Of course Richard was behind this. The timing was too perfect, and she'd seen the triumphant look in his eyes when he'd happened to run into her at the club 2 nights ago. Cancel my morning meetings, Victoria said. I need to make some calls. The first call was to Marcus. His phone went straight to voicemail, which wasn't unusual since he was probably under a car hood somewhere. But her second call to the garage was answered by Joe Johnson, who sounded uncomfortable and evasive. Marcus isn't available right now, Miss Sterling. He's dealing with some things. What kind of things? There was a long pause. Maybe you should ask him yourself when you see him. Victoria hung up, her anxiety growing. She tried Marcus's cell, phoned 3 more times before finally driving to the garage during her lunch break. The scene that greeted her made her stomach drop. A small crowd of reporters and photographers had gathered outside Johnson's auto repair, shouting questions at anyone who entered or left. Marcus was nowhere to be seen, but she spotted Joe Johnson trying to shoo the media away from his front door. She parked around the corner and approached on foot, pulling her baseball cap low over her face. One of the mechanics she recognized, Jimmy, was smoking a cigarette by the side entrance. Where's Marcus? She asked quietly. Jimmy looked around nervously. Inside, but he's not talking to anybody. Been holed up in the back office all morning. The phone hasn't stopped ringing and people keep showing up wanting to take pictures. Victoria made her way through the garage to the back office where she found Marcus sitting at Joe's desk staring at a computer screen. His face was grim, and he looked up when she entered with an expression she'd never seen before. Victoria, I was wondering when you'd show up. Something in his tone made her heart sink. Marcus, what's wrong? I mean, besides the obvious media circus. He turned the computer screen toward her. It was showing a social media page filled with comments about the newspaper article. Victoria read a few lines and immediately wished she hadn't. Gold digger. Using her for money. Probably can't even read. Trailer trash trying to social climb. The comments went on and on, each one more vicious than the last. This is what people think of me, Marcus said quietly. This is what they think about us. Marcus, these are just trolls on the internet. They don't know you, they don't know us, don't they? Marcus stood up and walked to the window where he could see the reporters still gathered outside. Look at this situation, Victoria. Really look at it. I'm a mechanic from the wrong side of town, and you're one of the richest women in the city. To them, there's only one reason I could be with you. Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. You don't believe that. It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what everyone else believes. And right now, everyone thinks I'm some kind of con artist trying to take advantage of you. Victoria crossed the room and took his hands in hers. I don't care what everyone else thinks. But you should care, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. You have a company to run, thousands of employees depending on you. This scandal is going to hurt your business, your reputation, your ability to lead. My board can't fire me, Victoria said fiercely. I own controlling interest in the company. But they can make your life miserable. They can question every decision you make, undermine your authority, drive away investors. Marcus pulled his hands free and walked back to the desk. I've been thinking about this all morning, Victoria. We've known each other for less than a week. Is what we have worth destroying everything you've worked for? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. Are you breaking up with me? I'm trying to be realistic about what this costs you. Before Victoria could respond, Joe Johnson burst through the office door. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a problem. That Richard Blackwood fellow is out front with the reporters. Says he's here to make a statement about Ms. Sterling's unfortunate associations. Victoria's face went white with rage. That bastard. He orchestrated this whole thing. She pushed past both men and strode through the garage toward the front entrance. Marcus and Joe followed, along with several curious mechanics. Outside, Richard Blackwood stood in front of the reporters like he was holding a press conference. He was wearing his most expensive suit and his most concerned expression. As a member of Sterling Industries' board of directors, I feel obligated to express the board's concern about recent events, he was saying. Ms. Sterling is under enormous pressure as CEO, and we're worried that this relationship might represent poor judgment during a vulnerable time. Victoria burst through the front door of the garage like an avenging angel. Richard Blackwood, you slimy, manipulative snake. The cameras immediately swung toward her, and the reporters began shouting questions. Victoria ignored them all, marching straight up to Richard with fury blazing in her eyes. How dare you come to my friend's place of business and spread lies about me? Richard's practiced smile faltered slightly. Victoria, I'm only concerned about your well-being and that of the company. You're concerned about your own ambitions, Victoria shot back. You've wanted to push me out as CEO since the day my father died, and now you think you've found your excuse. The reporters were eating this up, cameras flashing and recording devices thrust forward to catch every word. That's simply not true, Richard said, trying to regain his composure. The board has legitimate concerns about your recent behavior. My recent behavior? Victoria's voice rose. You mean falling in love with a good man? Because that's what this is about, Richard. I'm in love with Marcus Johnson and he's in love with me, and that terrifies you because it means you can't control me anymore. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Victoria had just declared her love for Marcus in front of a dozen reporters and cameras. Marcus, who had followed her outside, stood frozen in shock. Richard seized on the moment. You see? This is exactly the kind of emotional instability the board is concerned about. Making declarations of love about a man you've known for less than a week? 5 days, Victoria said firmly. I've known Marcus for 5 days, and in that time he's shown me more genuine kindness and respect than you've shown me in 5 years of working together. She turned to face the cameras directly. You want a statement? Here's your statement. Marcus Johnson is the most honest, hardworking, decent man I've ever met. He fixed my car when I was stranded. He's shown me what it means to be treated like a person instead of a title. And yes, I'm in love with him. If the board has a problem with that, they can call a meeting and we'll discuss it properly, instead of ambushing me with reporters. Victoria spun on her heel and walked back toward Marcus, who was still standing in the garage doorway looking stunned. Did you mean that? He asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the shouting reporters. Every word, Victoria said, taking his face in her hands. I love you, Marcus. I don't care who knows it. This time when she kissed him, it was in front of a dozen cameras and with full knowledge that the moment would be broadcast across the city. Marcus kissed her back, and for a moment the whole world disappeared except for the two of them. When they broke apart, Richard Blackwood was red-faced and furious, realizing his plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of looking like a woman making poor choices, Victoria looked strong and defiant, a successful woman fighting for her right to love whom she chose. Clear out, Joe Johnson shouted at the reporters. This is private property and you're trespassing. As the media circus gradually dispersed, Victoria and Marcus retreated to the back office. Marcus closed the door and leaned against it, running his hands through his hair. "You just told the entire city you love me," he said, still sounding dazed. "I did. Any regrets?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen from him. "Just one." "What's that?" "I should have said it first." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I love you too, Victoria Sterling, even if your board of directors wants to have me killed." Victoria laughed, feeling lighter than she had all day. "Let them try. I think I've got a pretty good bodyguard." Outside, the last of the reporters were packing up their equipment, but the story was far from over. The battle for Victoria's future was just beginning, and Richard Blackwood wasn't the type of man who accepted defeat gracefully. But for now, in the back office of a humble auto repair shop, two people who had found each other against all odds were planning their next move together. The Sterling Industries boardroom had never felt more like a battlefield. Victoria sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, flanked by 12 board members who looked like they were attending a funeral. Richard Blackwood sat directly across from her, his expression smugly confident. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, shuffling through a stack of papers, "we're here today to discuss the recent events that have brought negative publicity to Sterling Industries and raised serious questions about our CEO's judgment." Victoria remained calm, her hands folded on the table. She'd spent the weekend preparing for this moment, and Marcus had been with her every step of the way, helping her practice her presentation and reminding her of her own worth. The newspaper articles, the social media scandal, the spectacle outside, that garage, Richard continued. "All of this reflects poorly on our company's reputation. Our stock price has dropped 3% since the story broke." 3%, Victoria said calmly. "In a volatile market where companies regularly see swings of 5 to 10% based on weather reports and celebrity gossip." Richard's jaw tightened. "The point is, your personal life has become a liability to this company." "Has it?" Victoria stood and activated the presentation screen behind her. "Let's look at some actual facts, shall we?" The first slide showed Sterling Industries' performance under Victoria's leadership over the past 3 years. Revenue was up 40%, employee satisfaction at an all-time high, and they'd successfully expanded into 3 new markets. "Under my leadership, this company has had its 3 most profitable years in its 40-year history," Victoria said, clicking to the next slide. "We've created over 2,000 new jobs, increased worker safety standards across all our facilities, and maintained a customer satisfaction rating of 96%. She moved to the next slide, which showed recent contract wins and pending deals. "Last week, before any of you knew about my personal life, we closed the Henderson manufacturing contract, worth $12 million annually. The Morrison Group, which Richard was so eager to introduce me to at the club, has expressed interest in a partnership that could be worth $50 million over 5 years. Board member Margaret Chen, one of Victoria's few allies, spoke up. "Those are impressive numbers, Victoria, but Richard does raise concerns about public perception." "Public perception," Victoria repeated, clicking to her final slide. This one showed social media sentiment analysis and news coverage from the past week. 73% of social media comments about Sterling Industries this week have been positive. People are calling us a company that values real relationships over superficial networking. 3 major business magazines have requested interviews about my authentic leadership style. She turned to face the board directly. "The truth is, my relationship with Marcus has humanized me in the public eye. People see me as a real person who falls in love and makes choices based on genuine feeling, not corporate calculation. That's not a liability, it's an asset." Richard stood up, his face flushed. "You're talking about a mechanic, Victoria. A man with a high school education who works with his hands for minimum wage. I'm talking about a man who built his own business from nothing, who employs 6 people in his community, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home to care for his dying grandfather." Victoria shot back. "I'm talking about someone who has never once asked me for money, never tried to use my connections for his own gain, and never treated me as anything other than an equal partner." The room fell silent. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Furthermore, Victoria continued. I find it interesting that none of you questioned my judgment when I was dating Jonathan Whitmore, despite the fact that he was clearly more interested in my business connections than in me. Or when I was engaged to Bradley Morrison, who broke up with me via text message when a better networking opportunity presented itself. Margaret Chen nodded slowly. You make valid points, Victoria. I make more than valid points, Victoria said, her voice growing stronger. I make the argument that this board has no business dictating my personal life as long as I continue to deliver exceptional results for this company, which I have consistently for 3 years. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is exactly the kind of emotional decision-making that concerns us. You're letting your feelings cloud your business judgment. No, Richard, Victoria said quietly. I'm letting my feelings guide me towards someone who makes me a better person and consequently a better leader. Marcus doesn't want anything from me except my happiness. Can you say the same? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room knew about Richard's attempts to court Victoria over the years, and his increasing frustration at being rebuffed. Board member Harold Fitzgerald, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. Victoria, we're all concerned about your well-being. This relationship seems very sudden. It is sudden, Victoria agreed. Sometimes the best things in life are. But if you're worried about my judgment, let's put it to a test. She walked back to her seat and sat down calmly. I'm proposing a 6-month evaluation period. Judge me not on my personal life, but on my professional performance. If at the end of 6 months, company performance has declined, stock prices have fallen, or there's any measurable negative impact that can be directly attributed to my relationship with Marcus, then I'll consider your concerns valid. And if there's no negative impact, Margaret asked, then this board agrees to stop interfering in my personal life and focus on what we're actually here to do, run a successful business. The board members looked at each other, several of them nodding thoughtfully. Richard looked like he wanted to object, but he'd been outmaneuvered and he knew it. I think that's a reasonable proposal, said Thomas Wright, the board's longest-serving member. All in favor? 8 hands went up. Richard and 3 of his closest allies abstained, but it was enough for a majority. Motion carried. Margaret announced. We'll reconvene in 6 months to evaluate company performance. As the board members filed out, Richard lingered, his face dark with anger. This isn't over, Victoria, he said quietly. Your little mechanic will show his true colors eventually, and when he does, I'll be here to pick up the pieces. Richard, Victoria said, standing to face him, if you spend half as much energy focusing on your actual job as you do scheming against me, you might become a valuable board member. Until then, stay out of my way. After Richard left, Victoria slumped in her chair, exhausted but victorious. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How did it go? She texted back. I won. Dinner tonight to celebrate? Your place or Romano's? Victoria smiled as she typed her response. Romano's. I want to celebrate with real people who care about us, not impress anyone with expensive restaurants. That evening, as they sat in their corner booth at Romano's, sharing a bottle of wine and laughing with Maria Romano about her latest attempts to set up her grandson with a nice girl, Victoria realized something important. For the first time in her adult life, she was exactly where she wanted to be with exactly the person she wanted to be with. The battle with her board had been won, but more importantly, she'd won the right to live her life on her own terms. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. So what happens now? Now we take it one day at a time, Victoria said. We build something real together, away from corporate politics and social expectations. We just see where this goes. And if it goes somewhere permanent? Victoria grinned, remembering her impulsive promise from that first day. Well, I did technically promise to marry you if you fixed my engine. Marcus laughed, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss it gently. I might just hold you to that. As they sat in the warm, welcoming atmosphere of Romano's, surrounded by the sounds of families enjoying dinner and the smell of fresh bread and marinara sauce, both Victoria And Marcus knew they had found something precious and rare, love that crossed social boundaries, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than convenience or ambition. 6 months later, when Victoria's company posted record profits and employee satisfaction scores, the board meeting to evaluate her performance lasted exactly 10 minutes. Richard Blackwood had resigned 2 weeks earlier to pursue other opportunities, and the remaining board members unanimously voted to extend their confidence in Victoria's leadership. The wedding was held at Romano's, with Maria Romano catering and the entire garage crew serving as groomsmen. It wasn't the society wedding Victoria could have had, but it was perfect for the woman she had become, someone who had learned that the best things in life couldn't be bought, only earned through courage, honesty, and the willingness to love someone exactly as they are.